What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 84, and this is a special interview with episode, and I'll be introducing my special guest on the interview episode very, very soon. But before we introduce our guest, as I'd like to do every single episode, is to throw out our social media plugs. So you know where to find us. On Twitter, first of all, you can find us at withjohners_pod. We're on Instagram as well. Just go instagram.com/wrestlingwithjohners. And of course, we're on Facebook. Go and search our friendly, fun, interactive Facebook community page. Just search Wrestling with Johners. That's Johners spelled Johners. And of course, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, please don't forget to hit subscribe so that you can be notified every time a new episode drops. You can find the Wrestling with Johners podcast on all popular podcast platforms, including Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and YouTube. So please spread the word. Please give us a follow on all of our social media pages and subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channels today. So this is the first of a number of interviews in collaboration with Turnbuckle TV, and as we're all aware, Turnbuckle TV is easily the best UK-based pro wrestling on-demand service available today, with over 30 channels shining a light on the very best independent wrestling from around the UK. Simply go to turnbuckletv.com to subscribe to over 30 channels featuring more UK indie wrestling that you can shake a stick at from only $3.99 per month. And I think there's also quite a bit of free content on there as well. So go and check it out. That's turnbuckletv.com. So that leads us very nicely to the first interview in collaboration with Turnbuckle TV. And we have one of the hardest working pro wrestlers around at the moment. I give to you, ladies and gentlemen, Pure Evil, CJ Carter. So CJ, thank you for coming on to the Wrestling with Johners podcast today. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here, and great to speak to you. Yeah, I'm great.
Yeah, no, well, it's fantastic to have you on board. And I was approached to kind of interview you a few weeks ago, and I jumped at the opportunity. And so can't wait to get stuck into the many questions that I have for you. But one question, CJ, that I always like to ask my guests during these interviews is I'm always fascinated to try and find out how my guests first come across professional wrestling, what hooked them into professional wrestling, what was their first encounter as a fan, or kind of their earliest recollection of professional wrestling. So can you remember that far back? Was it quite an early age, as most of us wrestling fans tend to kind of get into wrestling at a young age? But what about yourself?
Yeah, it was a really young age. In fact, my earliest memories are of watching wrestling with my dad. Sat on the sofa, maybe 3 or 4 years old, and from pictures that I have from when I was younger, and from stories my dad's told me, I would sit with him even younger than that and watch wrestling. I've got pictures of me sitting there watching it, from 2 years old. I've got pictures of Papa Shango on the TV and stuff like that, and all my wrestling figures lined up all around the front room from the age of about 3 years old.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, my dad was a big wrestling fan when I was a kid. Funnily enough, he doesn't really watch it anymore, actually, other than to come and see my shows sometimes. But as a kid, he was a huge wrestling fan, and just running around the house as a 3 or 4 year old, wrestling was always on, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing. I was absolutely hooked on it, and I would probably say from about that age, 3, 4, 5, until about 14, 15 or 16, I honestly didn't really do much other than watch wrestling. Honestly, I was completely obsessed. Like I was more than just your casual fan or average fan. I was just obsessed by it. Yeah, I didn't really watch, even as a kid, I didn't really watch many films or that many kids' TV programs or had that many toys that weren't wrestling toys. All I watched was wrestling, and all I did was play with wrestling figures. It's just, my life was just consumed by it, really.
So it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that you're a lifelong wrestling fan then, really, from the age of 2, watching WWF with your dad, with all your toys, and Papa Shango being on the TV. I mean, that must have been pretty scary experience, watching Papa Shango at such a young age. But I mean, going on to my next question then, which wrestling promotions and wrestlers did you enjoy watching? I'm guessing WWF was one of them, but who were some of the wrestlers that really caught your attention and made you even more invested into professional wrestling? What promotions and characters really stood out to you?
Well, yeah, I was a big WWF at the time,
Yeah.
WWE now, big WWF fan. Because that was pretty much all we had over here, to be honest.
Yeah.
There wasn't much WCW on TV. I think like on some very random German station, I found once that they were showing some WCW pay-per-views. So I remember watching Spring Stampede. I think it was Spring Stampede '94.
Yeah.
And it was in German. And I remember having a VHS where I taped that from the TV because that was the only way I could see WCW. But I was just a big WWF fan, and yeah, I mean, obviously as a young kid, as most people did, I think Hogan was my man. I was a big Hogan fan, but as I got slightly older, by about 5 or 6, I started really to gravitate towards like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, to be honest, and I pretty much stuck with them all the way through until the late '90s, and then sort of like during the Attitude Era, I dip in and out of WCW as well, and you know, there's a few characters there that I like, but it was always for me. Shawn Michaels was the guy always growing up, and yeah, he was as a kid and as a young wrestling fan, he was a big influence on me.
So what did you like about Shawn Michaels in particular? Did you like his kind of technical ability in the ring, or was it his cocky character, his heel persona? What did you like? What gravitated towards you about Shawn Michaels in particular?
I think it was probably, yeah, I did like the kind of cocky self-assuredness of him, but to be honest, for whatever reason, once I got past that very early stage of being a Hogan fan at 3, 4 years old, maybe 5 at a push, I really started to really gravitate towards the guys who were good wrestlers, even from a fairly young age. I wasn't that sold on big, large, over the top gimmicks or characters. I liked guys that could go in the ring and were going to do great 15 or 20 minute matches, you know. Even from a fairly young age, for whatever reason, I don't know why. But,
you obviously had a great taste in wrestling from a young age then, CJ. But and do you get much of a chance to watch wrestling nowadays? I mean, I'm guessing you're still a big fan of the product, and you know, what promotions do you watch nowadays, and what are your thoughts on the current product, especially the product that we see on our TV every single week?
I'll be honest, I watch wrestling still, but I don't watch WWE anymore. I stopped watching that maybe around the early 2000s, maybe 04, 05. I kind of what I kind of found towards the early 2000s was with the kind of when the Wrestling Channel came on Sky. I don't know if you remember that, but I started getting a lot of kind of exposure to all these independent promotions that I didn't really know that much about, other than reading about them in magazines like Ring of Honor, and then when TNA first started, and they had FWA from this country on there as well. And I had already become a very big ECW fan from sort of like '97 or '98, and I used to buy the tapes from RF Video. I used to buy loads of VHSs. I used to be obsessed with collecting like Japanese tapes and Mexican tapes and buying all the ECW tapes, and so obviously I got towards the late '90s. I got very into ECW. And then when that closed down, and then the Wrestling Channel started, sort of like, I think it was about '02, I found, you know, a very similar style of wrestling and product was available to me that I just didn't know about outside of WWE. And I just became a big fan of the independent scene, to be honest. And from then on, I've dipped in and out of WWE, and I keep up to tabs with it. But mostly what I watch now will be New Japan. Will be Ring of Honor. Occasionally, I'll watch some Mexican stuff if I've read it. Like I'll go online, read some reviews. If I hear it, like Kenny Omega had a great match the other week on AAA, so I dug that out against Rey Fenix. Like I'll dig out random matches here and there, and I'm watching AEW at the moment. But yeah, that's kind of, and I watch a lot of British wrestling as well. A lot of British wrestling.
And it is funny that you said that you used to get tapes via tape traders like RF videos. I did exactly the same thing back in the mid to late 90s. And I don't know if you remember a former Power Slam writer called Rob Butcher. And I used to get all of my tapes from Rob. And man, I had shelves across all four walls in my bedroom filled with VHSs. It was a brilliant time to be a wrestling fan even back then, because the product wasn't readily available. And you did have to kind of find these tape traders and get it shipped in from America or wherever, and the same as you, I'd get content from New Japan, All Japan, all over the world. But fascinating time. And like I say, I think that made it even more of an interesting and more of a fun time to be a wrestling fan, because it wasn't readily available and you did have to search hard, and when you got it, it was like gold, and you'd sit down and you'd watch it and really enjoy it. But that's really fascinating. But let's have a little look about you wanting to become a professional wrestler. So when did you first become interested in becoming a pro wrestler? Tell us about what sparked your desire to be a pro wrestler then, CJ.
So to be honest, for as long as I can remember, that's all I've wanted to do. When everyone asked me as a kid, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to be a wrestler. That's the only answer I had for them. I remember telling my mum that when I was quite young, and I remember her just laughing at me and being like, don't be so ridiculous. That's that's not feasible. That's not the kind of thing that normal people do. I think most people look at wrestlers and they think, if you don't look like Hogan or The Rock or Braun Strowman, or do you know what I mean? The stereotypical 6'2" plus, jacked up, very big, tanned. That's what people think of. But I was adamant that I was like, one way or another, I was gonna wrestle, whether that was on the big stage or a small stage or whatever. I was gonna get in a ring. And so what I started doing from the age of about 12 was trying to find wrestling schools. I was desperately trying to find wrestling schools in this country, but it was very hard. So when I was 12, we're talking about 2000, and there wasn't a lot of schools around in this country, and it's not like there is now, where I could name 20 plus schools just off the top of my head now, and there's 30, 40, 50 more in the country. Then there was like Hammerlock, and beyond that there wasn't an awful lot around. And so I just remember keep looking. And then when I was 14, I found this advert for an FWA training school that was in London, in Finsbury Park, and I was like, that's it, there's one in London, I gotta go. So I was 14 and I went there and I started training there. And then I found Dropkicks, which was in Purfleet in Essex, which was accessible, so I went there as well, and I was training across between the two for a few years. But then we were doing some training outside. It was we had set a ring up in the back of a pub actually, and they were doing it was a British wrestling sort of like reunion convention that they were doing, hosted by Dropkicks, and so they were running training out the back as well. And we were doing training out there, and I managed to do a dive over the top rope. I landed awkwardly on my leg and just completely blew out my right knee. And I was I'm trying to think what year that was. I'm trying to think how old I was then. It's hard. I was maybe 17 at the time, I think, and maybe even 16. And I completely blew out my leg. In fact, it hurt so bad at the time, I was convinced I broke my leg. But one of the guys who was there, who I actually know now, funnily enough, and I didn't see for about 10 years between, carried me from the ring to his car, and he drove me to the station, and got the station back to where I live, and I went to the hospital. And they told me that I'd completely torn my ACL and blown out all the cartilage in my right knee, and that was a long sort of like process to get that back to where I could walk properly again.
And at this point, you were still only training. I mean, you
only training.
Being 16, 17, still only training.
Yeah.
So still early days for you. I mean, I think you said that you were started training when you were about 14. So this was a couple of years in. Still very young. I mean, did that injury put you off at all? Did it make you kind of think twice about continuing wrestling? I mean, did you fear that you might not be able to continue your training?
It didn't put me off, but I did think I was done, to be honest, because I mean, I didn't walk properly for 2 years. Like, it was pretty bad. Like, maybe if I'd had the surgery straight away, if you look at current athletes or WWE superstars, you know, if they get an injury like that, I'm sure they're taken straight in, they're looked at, they have surgery the next day, and the rehab immediately starts, right?
Yeah.
But I had to wait. I had to go on a waiting list for 6 months just to even for them to even do the surgery. So, you know, I'm sitting around for 6 months with my leg completely ruined, not being able to walk. So I was on crutches for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then I had the surgery. And then it was another 6 to 8 months after that before I could even think about being back to normal. And I managed to, in that time, I managed to blow out my knee at least 2 more times.
Wow.
Not to the point where I needed surgery, but to the point where, you know, it would go and then I would have to start the rehab all over again. And my knee was very, very weak for a long time. So I couldn't run properly for 2 years. I didn't walk properly for nearly 2 years. I was on crutches for over a year. And everyone had said to me, you know what, I don't think, you know, you're not going to be wrestling again.
Maybe it's not for you. Yeah.
Maybe it's not for you. And you know what, I kind of wrote it off a little bit, and it was heartbreaking. I'll be honest with you, it was. You know, I was only young, and it's what I'd ever really wanted to do. But I've been told that, you know, I can't do this, and my knee was in such a bad way that, in fact, it was every time I tried to run, it would actually just come out of place. Like the knee would come out of its socket, and I'd have to crack it back in.
Ouch.
Yeah.
So you was on the shelf for 2 years then, CJ, and then you did find it longer than 2 years, and you came back and continued your training. I mean, we spoke a little bit off air, and you said that you made your debut at about the age of 21.
Yeah.
So I mean, do you feel that the injury that you had when you were 16 that kind of slowed your progress down, so that potentially if you hadn't have suffered that injury, you might have made your pro wrestling debut a lot sooner?
Maybe it's possible. I mean, who knows? I would like to hope that would be the case for sure. I felt like I was kind of almost ready. Do you know what I mean? I kind of felt like I was almost there. I've been training for a good few years. I hadn't had a show yet, but I was still very young. You know, my goal was always, if I can get to 18, I'll definitely get on a show by the time I'm 18, which was only like a year off, you know? So, and then obviously the injury happened, and then I just thought, you know what, maybe it's not for me. And so then I just focused on other things, like, you know, I focused on college and university, and I was focusing on my life outside of wrestling, and I was like just getting on with my life really, and thinking, you know what, maybe that's just behind me. That was a thing I did when I was younger. It's never going to happen. But then I got into my early 20s, and then I was just like, you know what, I've got to give this another go. And if I do it and I blow out my knee in the first training session, then fine, that's it, I'm done. At least I've tried, you know. But I thought, I'm not going to know unless I try. So I went back to training. I found another school that was fairly local to me, and I trained there, and then I started doing shows. From about 21 or 22, I started doing shows.
Yeah. So according to my research, then, CJ, you've been wrestling professionally since about 2010, so for about 9 years now or so, and you made your debut for LDN. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So and your wrestling name back then was Chris St. Clair. So how was that experience back in those early days when you were just breaking in? You know, after all the trials and tribulations of your teenage years and the injuries and training, and then finally you make your debut for LDN. You even had a fair bit of success for LDN. You featured in some battle royals or some Royal Rumbles where you performed quite well. So tell us about some of them early days, certainly in the first couple of years as Chris St. Clair.
I mean, that was a very weird gimmick or name. It wasn't really much gimmick to it. And before that, actually, I was called Chris Awesome for a little while. Yeah, even before that, I started doing Chris St. Clair in 2010. I just didn't, you know, I was asked at the time, what do you want your name to be? And I was a bit like, I don't know. I was stumped. I didn't know. I was like, Chris, I could just go with Chris something, and they were like, okay, Chris Awesome it is, out you go. And so I did that for a while, and then someone suggested to me, why don't you do Chris St. Clair? There used to be a wrestler called Tony St. Clair back in the World of Sport days, and they were like, it's got a nice ring to it, why don't you just go with Chris St. Clair? It sounds better than Chris Awesome. And I was like, yeah, anything sounds better than Chris Awesome, so let's go with Chris St. Clair. And so I went with that, and yeah, I worked for LDM for a couple of years. I think 2 years I worked for them, and I was working up slowly. And I had some good times there actually. Like I wrestled Tom Dawkins, who now does Car Noir. I
Very
wrestled
interesting.
him. Yeah, I wrestled him a few times there, and I actually beat him for my first ever championship, which was they called it the Academy Championship, and it was later changed to the Junior Heavyweight Championship. And I beat him for that. That was my first ever championship. And I got to work some good names there. Like I worked Pete Dunne there. I worked Damien Dunne there. Richard Parliament. I don't know if you remember Richard Parliament. He was on the TNA boot camp once upon a time.
Vaguely,
yeah. And, and there was, I did enjoy it. But, yeah, some personal life stuff got in the way towards the end of that run. I had my first daughter, which was a big impact on that, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that led to me taking a little bit of time out again. After that, yeah.
So I've got in my research that between 2012 and 2017, you was kind of in and out of wrestling. Now we spoke again off air, and there was some other injuries that kind of cropped up during that time as well. But can you fill us in on some of the blanks as to, because you did return sporadically during them 5 years, but you was probably out more than you was in. Would that be fair to say?
I was actually in for a while through that period. Actually.
Right.
I was in so I came back in 2012, and I started training at Lucha Britannia, the London School of Lucha Libre.
Yeah.
And that's where I met Paddy, who now does Gene Money, and he had not long been there as well, and we started a tag team called the Lavelle Brothers. So if you search the Lavelle Brothers in Google, you'll probably pull up a few things. There's a little promo we did for a match with T-Bone. I think it was Preston Championship Wrestling or something like that. It was us challenging them to potentially have a match with them. That usually always comes up. But yeah, we worked for about 2 years as that tag team as the Lavelle Brothers. And it was going pretty well, to be honest. It was building slowly, and we were starting to pick up bookings at various places. We were working for Lucha Britannia. We were working for the London School of Lucha Libre. We'd done some shows for IPW. We'd done some shows for WrestleForce for a place called Pride down in Devon.
Yeah.
And we had a fairly high-profile match against Project Ego. I don't know if you'd. It was Martin Kirby and Chris Travis.
Okay.
And yeah, it was. Look, we weren't setting the world alight. Don't get me wrong, but we were slowly chipping away. But then again, I had some personal issues, some life stuff, and I decided to step away again. And that time I was away from 2014. All the way through until 2017. So that was my longest gap. And actually, if I'm honest with you, I was done at that point. I was done. I was a bit worn out and burnt out from constantly grinding away in wrestling, and feeling like, to be honest, I wasn't really getting anywhere, and it was getting to me a bit. And I had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, and so I kind of thought, you know what? Maybe I'll call it a day. And I was done with wrestling at that point. And for all intents and purposes, I wasn't going to come back when I left in 2014.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you did return in February 2017 after being away for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So how was that feeling to be, finally coming back into the ring? Describe that feeling of being back, because you said yourself that you thought you was done. You thought that your wrestling career was behind you, and but then what sparked the change of mind, and what was that kind of feeling like to actually be back in the wrestling game and to, I suppose, fall back in love with it again?
I tell you what, it was Paddy. It was Gene Money, the guy who I was tagging with previously. If it wasn't for him, I would not be wrestling now, and I would not be enjoying the the success I'm having currently, or loving wrestling as much as I do right now either. I was done with wrestling. I'd walked away. I'd even got to the point where I was so frustrated with it actually that I wasn't even watching wrestling anymore, because it was just making me a bit, I was getting a bit bitter about the whole thing, to be honest. But Paddy didn't give up on me. He kept messaging me. Every few months he'd message me and be like, "Come on, come back." He'd started taking training at a wrestling school in Milton Keynes, and he'd started kind of co-running a promotion up there, and he was always kind of chipping away at me, just kind of nudge, "Come on, come back." And every few months he'd message me and I'd be like, "Nah, I'm done, man. I'm done. I'm not coming back. I finished with wrestling." But he just never gave up, and then eventually, after about 2.5 years of that, I kind of thought, you know what, I've loved wrestling my whole life. It's all I've ever wanted to do. I had some bad experiences, fine. Everyone has bad experiences. I had some stuff going on in my personal life, fine. Everyone's kind of, everyone goes through rough times, right? I felt like I'd put that behind me. I felt like enough time had passed. And I felt like I was getting to an age as well where if I didn't give it one more shot, then that was probably it for me, to be honest. 2017, what was that? So nearly 3 years ago, it'd be 3 years in February. I'll be turning 33 in January. So I was 30 at the time. So it was kind of now or never, right? And I just caved in. And I said to him, you know what? I'll come back. I'll come and train with you. And I'll see how it goes. And my goal was actually to just, if I only worked one show every 2 months and it was only for the promotion in Milton Keynes that Paddy was working with at the time, then I would have been happy with that. But as soon as I got back, I got the bug. I just got the bug in a big way. And it does that to you, doesn't it? Wrestling does that to you. It gets under your skin. It gets under your skin. It consumes you. It takes over your life. Even as a fan.
It's an addiction. It's an addiction.
Yeah.
You don't need drugs when you got wrestling. But
Let
me ask you about that return then, CJ. I mean, was your return in 2017? Was that the resurgence? Was that the debut of your current persona, CJ Carter? Then
that was yeah.
So you didn't return as Chris St. Clair. You made your return as pure evil CJ Carter.
Yeah.
So what prompted the change of gimmick, the change of look, the change of character when you made your return in 2017?
Well, the thing was, is I'd done 2 previous gimmicks. I'd done the Christopher Lavelle character, which was actually a posh boy from Eton, like with polo shirts and cardigans around his neck and a croquet mallet, and we were like doing the whole Tory boy better than you tag team thing, right? Clean shaven, short hair, looked like a little college, like Harvard graduate or something. And before that I was just Chris St. Clair, just happy clappy white meat baby face. And when I came back this time I was like I don't want to be recognized as anything or anyone I have been previously, so I wanted a completely different look. I wanted people to look at me and have no idea that I'd even wrestled before. So I grew my hair out, I grew my beard out, and I started a whole new look. And then secondly, I wanted a character that was closer to me as a person, because everything I'd done before that was not. Everything I'd done that was me just trying to either fit in or do something that someone had given me or just try something that I thought might work. I wanted something to be more me. And I'd been through some pretty dark periods over the 3 years that I'd been out of wrestling, and even towards the end of the last run. And actually, so what I wanted to do was trying to tap into that kind of, those darker moments, those parts of my life where I was a bit, I let things consume me that I shouldn't have, like bitterness and hate and anger and resentment, things like that, and try and tap that into a character and then get that out, in the ring and on the stage, and try and let that stuff out instead of just holding it in. And it just seemed to work for the first time, out of, whatever it was by that point. What was it, like 6 years or 7 years on and off, in and out of wrestling? For the first time, I actually felt like I'd like stumbled upon something that felt more like me, that worked, and the fans were starting to enjoy it as well. So
yeah, that's really fascinating. So tell me a little bit about your wrestling style then, CJ. You know, your wrestling style could be described as a mixture of technical, maybe high flying, but how would you describe your wrestling style? And would you say your wrestling style is influenced by any of your wrestling heroes?
I'd tell you, you kind of summed it up, to be honest. Like in and out, it's technical and it's high flying and it's aggressive and intense. That's what I try and go for. You know, two people whose styles I absolutely love: Chris Benoit,
yeah,
and Dynamite Kid. Throw Eddie Guerrero in there as well. They're not the biggest guys. I'm not the biggest guy. I've always had that kind of against me a little bit. I'm only 5'7". I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but none of those guys were the biggest guys either. But watch them wrestle, and my God, you believe they could take on anyone, right?
Oh yeah.
They're super aggressive. They're super intense. Everything they do just got like a snap to it. And you know, that's what I really wanted to go for. And you know, if I had it my way, if I was a bit more athletic, which sadly I'm not, you know, I'd be Will Ospreay or I'd be Pac, or you know, I really want to go out there and be doing 450s and shooting star presses and all this stuff. You know, that's the kind of style that I love. I was a big X Division fan when TNA first started, and that's the kind of style that I really gravitate towards. And so, yeah, I try to add in as much high flying and athleticism as I can to the point at which my body will allow me. But then I try to add in some technical stuff because I think you know, I found that over the years I'm quite good at that. And then I try to add in my own kind of aggression and intensity to it, which I take from kind of Dynamite Kid and Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and people like that.
Yeah, it definitely works. So one thing that I've picked up on that's really stood out to me about you and your character is your confidence and ability on the microphone. So now it's one thing to be a great wrestler, but not everybody has the natural ability as a promo guy. Now, when did you first discover your confidence on the mic then, CJ?
I tell you what, it wasn't always that way.
Oh.
When my first run as Chris St. Clair, I wouldn't have dreamed of even doing a promo. If you put a camera in my face, I would have just frozen. It wasn't until I started doing the tag with Paddy, when we started doing the Lavelle brothers, and he, like, I don't know if you've seen Gene Money, but he is probably the most, if not one of the most charismatic people in the country.
An amazing character. Love Gene.
What a character! What a character! And you put a camera in front of that man without any warning, and he will deliver you an absolutely incredible promo. He's just that type of person. He's super charismatic. He just can come out with just the most incredibly entertaining stuff. And so working with him for 2 years, he forced me to do promos. He pulled cameras in front of us and was like, right, we're doing a promo. And it taught me actually that it's not as daunting or as hard as you think it is, actually. You just have to have a little bit of confidence in what you're saying, believe what you're saying, and try and get into the moment and you know, treat it like it's real. That's the key to everything. Whether you're in the ring or in front of the camera, treat it like it's real. You know, treat it like you really do want to get in the ring with whoever it is you're getting in the ring with, and you do really want to beat them, and it really does mean something to you because it should, to be honest. And the more you can tap into realism and it come from you as opposed to something you're trying to be, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, your promos and your mic work definitely comes across as real, definitely come across as very passionate, and definitely believe what you're saying in the ring. So fantastic.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
One promotion that you're really close to, a close connection with, and since it first opened its doors, you could say, back in February 2018, is Pro Wrestling Clash, based in Boreham Wood, if I'm correct. So, which is also your hometown, your home promotion, I understand. So now. I think you wrestled at nearly all of the shows, bar maybe one or two. Now, as mentioned, you've got a close connection with Clash. But what was it about Pro Wrestling Clash that's so special to you then, CJ?
Well, I guess number one is that I co-run it with Paddy. So, you know, we went from tag team partners to running a promotion together. And so, yeah, it's very close to my heart. And I've lived in Bournemouth my whole life. So is my family. You know, my dad lives in Bournemouth. My grandparents live in Bournemouth. My great grandparents lived in Bournemouth. My great great grandparents lived in Bournemouth.
Wow.
So I have a very strong connection to the local community. And to be honest, I know from living there, I knew there was a lot of wrestling fans there, and there just was no promotions within, an hour's drive of the area. And so I thought, what, I wanted more than anything, I just wanted to give something back to the community. And so, yeah, me and Paddy got together. We started Pro Wrestling Clash, February 2018. Initially, it was just a trial run. I was just going to put on one show. And hopefully it was going to be at least a semi-success, and it turned out to be a huge success. We sold out the first show with a month to go, and it was clearly an appetite for wrestling in the area, and so it just blew up, and it blew up really fast actually. It went from a startup company to it being spoken about in the same breath as some top promotions in the country very fast, which was a bit of a shock to me and to Paddy. And to be honest, I think at times we struggled to keep up with it, but I've loved every second of doing it, and I've loved wrestling on the promotion as well, because a lot of the people in the crowd are my family and friends.
Yeah, and you've had some really great matches under the Clash banner. You've with the likes of Cara Noir, Chuck Mambo, TK Cooper, and Dexter. You were involved in an awesome 6-man tag match at a Clash at the Beach in 2018. Yeah, you've even had a Bourne Wood street fight against Marcus Anthony. You've had some fantastic matches, and I think, am I right in thinking that Marcus Anthony's kind of been your on and off rival with Clash? But tell us a little bit about some of your experiences being in the ring with some of those names that I've mentioned under the Clash banner.
I mean, you've named some incredible talents there. I mean, one person that sticks out straight away from me is Cara Noir, Tom Dawkins, who I've known since we both wrestled for LDN, and he came through a couple of years before me, and so as I was just kind of coming in as the new guy, he'd just kind of spread his wings from being the new guy into like a semi-top guy there. And I learned so much from him. Even then, I learned so much from him. And even then, I said to myself, you know what, this guy's going to be one of the best wrestlers in the entire country, if not the world. And I've only seen him get better and better every single year since then. And so when we decided to start running Pro Wrestling Clash, the first name that I said I want on these shows was Cara Noir, because I just think he's the most talented guy in the country, to be honest, in the ring, bell to bell, and that's not to take anything away from his character or his charisma, because his character is incredible, and his entrance is probably the best entrance in all of British wrestling.
Oh, undoubted, yeah, definitely.
But bell to bell, inside that ring, I don't think there's anyone better in this country right now. And so to get to wrestle him was just incredible. It was a great experience. I loved every second of it. And another person who I got to work in that same match was Sam Stoker, who I think is also, right alongside Cara Noir as one of the best in the country, and has been for a long time. And when we first started running Clash, he wasn't as well known to everyone, but he was another name that was right at the top of the list, who we wanted to use as a top guy as well, because he's just so talented.
So he's one half of Pretty Deadly, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So since we started Clash, he formed a tag team with Lewis Howley, and now they're probably the best tag team in the country. So
well, that's it. They've been featured on NXT UK on a few occasions. So they're making a name for themselves, not just on a UK scale, but kind of worldwide now. So good for them. But so Cara Noir, echo your sentiments. The best entrance and one of the best wrestlers in the UK at the moment. But so many brilliant names that you've wrestled there under Clash. But now, not many of our listeners may not be aware, but Pro Wrestling Clash will be running its last show in February the 16th, so next year, 2020, and it will be entitled The Last Clash Bash. Now, I'm sure that it will be a very emotional night for all involved, especially the talent and the fans that have been supported Clash from day one. But what will the end of Pro Wrestling Clash mean to you as someone who's wrestled there from day one, is a co-owner? What will kind of that final day, that final show, and the end of Clash mean to you?
It's gonna be a sad day, but I think also an extremely happy one that we want to celebrate as well. I mean, I don't want it to be this completely somber thing. And it's not like, I can't speak for the reasons that many other promotions have closed down, but for us, certainly, it's not been because we were losing money or because we weren't drawing or because people weren't coming. And it certainly has nothing to do with WWE, which everyone likes to think is the reason that everyone's closing down. And it really isn't. It's just that the time has come. I think, when we first started it, we never really thought it would grow so big so fast, and to be honest, I think we're both struggling to keep up with it. With Paddy's career as Gene Money has blown up enormously over the last year. He's now one of the biggest names in the country. He's working. He debuted for Progress in September. I'm sure he's got many more Progress shows to come. Pretty much every other promotion in the country he's working for. My career is starting to pick up as well over the last 12 months. I said to you earlier that when I came back initially, I said if I could do one show every 2 months, I'd be happy. Most months now, I'm doing between 4 and 8 shows. So, which might not be that many to some people, but for me, with a family at home and a full-time job, that's a lot of commitment. And I think the thing is with how busy we both are in our own professional careers, we're struggling to keep up with running Pro Wrestling Clash at the level that it's at, and I think we'd rather go out on a high, having had 2 great years, than not give it the attention and the dedication it needs. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think a lot of people will be very sad to see Pro Wrestling Clash, disappear. But like I say, 2 fantastic years, so many great shows, and so much great talent that's performed under the Pro Wrestling Clash banner. You alluded to it earlier, then CJ. There's been a handful of UK promotions that have closed their doors for the final time this year alone. I mean, you look at Pro Wrestling Chaos, Defiant, IPW UK, Southside, and with Clash closing its doors for the final time next February. What do you think is kind of is there one big fundamental reason why this is happening? I mean, a lot of people, as you alluded to again, could be pointing their finger at some of the bigger promotions, not just WWE, but AEW. They've snatched up a lot of UK talent to exclusive contracts, but it can't just be that. What do you think are the reasons that these companies that have been around for a long time are closing their doors in close succession to one another?
I tell you what, everyone likes to gossip and get onto a rumor and read various things on the internet, and I think everyone likes to use the narrative that WWE have come over here and they're signing up all the talent and they're driving away all the promotions and they're killing British wrestling. I mean, I'm sure you've heard it all, right?
Yeah.
It's been everywhere. It's been all over the internet. It's been all over Facebook, and I think it's just been a little bit like a snowball that's just got out of control, and everyone likes to jump on the back of it. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it's true. As someone who is involved, in British wrestling and knows hundreds and hundreds of people, promoters as well as wrestlers, and has worked for nearly 30 different promotions in this country, I can tell you now that the majority of the companies that are going out of business have nothing to do with WWE coming over, and the fact that they're signing up a lot of talent it isn't an issue. There is so many great talented workers in this country that for every 50 that get signed, there's another 75 coming through. And so for every 50 wrestlers that go off to WWE, that's just another 50 doors opening for another 50 guys who are hungry and ready to come through and are just as good and just as talented, but just need that platform to show it. I don't think that's the case. I don't think the case is that WWE are driving these promotions out. I think, to be honest, from my point of view, that the wrestling bubble is kind of bursting in this country at the moment a little bit, but I think that's because of the success it's had, and therefore, it
couldn't get any bigger.
It couldn't get any bigger, but also Pot Kettle Black here. Everyone wants a piece of the pie. There's a lot. How many new promotions have you seen start over the last 2, 3, 4 years? I think I counted recently that there was over 25 promotions in London alone. That just wasn't the case 5 or 6 years ago. British wrestling blew up. British wrestling got huge, and that's amazing, and that's great, and that's been great for people like me, and that's been great for all the guys that I work with. But it can't sustain 2 or 3 new promotions popping up every month. It just can't. It can't do that. There's only so many wrestling fans in the country, and it doesn't matter if you make 100 new wrestling promotions. You're not going to make enough new fans to fill all of those promotions. So some of them are going to go. It's just by the process of that. Does that make sense?
It's a saturation point.
Exactly, 100%. 100%. The market is just oversaturated now, and that's got nothing to do with WWE. It's got nothing to do with it at all. There's just too many promotions and not enough fans.
And I've often thought that the WWE thing was a positive, or it needs to be seen as a positive, because it's finally given just desserts to those UK indie workers that have worked so hard and strived to achieve their goal, which they've done by getting a WWE contract. But it's also giving maybe an opportunity for new wrestlers, young fresh talent that's coming through, to see that as their next goal, really, to 5-6 years down the road, to get themselves signed, the same as the Pete Dunnes and the Tyler Bates, and use that as a bit of a driving force, so to help grow the fresh green grass that's coming up at the roots of the business, instead of blaming the very top of the business.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. Everything you've said, I fully agree with. Maybe it has had some negative effects somewhere, but I think there's been more positives than negatives, and like you said, it's given credit to the top guys who've been grafting away for the last 6-7 years. It's given them a bigger platform to show the world their skills, and how great they are. Look at Pete Dunne, for God's sake. I think he had the best match. He had the best match on Survivor Series the other week.
He did. Yes, he did.
As I said, I don't watch much WWE anymore, but I heard that match was so good that I went to dig it out myself and watch it, and I was blown away. Him and Adam Cole, that's my kind of wrestling. You ask what kind of wrestling I like, that's my kind of wrestling.
Yeah, same here.
And that's a guy who I mentioned earlier. I was working at LDN in 2011. He's been grafting away, and he deserves that opportunity. He deserves the big stage. And it's just, for every Pete Dunne that gets signed, that's another opportunity for CJ Carter. That's an opportunity for Gene Money. That's an opportunity for Cassius. That's an opportunity for Dexter or Harry Mann. There are plenty of wrestlers to go around, and good ones at that. So.
There we go. But we can't have you on the Wrestling with Jonas podcast without mentioning that you are the current reigning WIN or WIN Wrestling Heavyweight Champion. WIN. So now, for the listeners that might not be familiar with the WIN, it's based in Daventry in Northamptonshire, and with your most recent outing there being a successful title defence against Bagheera. Now, tell us a little bit about your journey with WIN Wrestling so far, and your time as their heavyweight champion.
I started wrestling for WIN last it would have been March 2018, and I'd only been back a year at the time, and I was only working for 3 or 4 different promotions, and mostly around the Milton Keynes area, because that's where I went back and debuted as CJ Carter, and they're not far up the M1 from Milton Keynes. Correct. So I got in contact with them. I did a few shows for them, and I just think they've got a great family-based product up there, which isn't seen enough for my liking. I think as I said, there's a lot of promotions around now, and places are struggling to stand out amongst the pack, I think. And I think WIN deserves more credit than it gets, to be honest. They bring in some great guys. They've had Sam Stoker in there recently, and Lewis Mayhew, who I think is another great talent in this country who doesn't get enough credit. And they've got a lot of great young guys coming through, because they have their own training school as well. And I just think they've got a good product and a good audience up there as well. And I love being their champion, to be honest. Since I've come back over the last few years, I've managed to win 4 heavyweight championships, and I take that with a great deal of pride. I know some people will say, "Oh, it's not real." you know, they're not really real championships. You didn't really win anything, blah, blah, blah. But to me, I take a great deal of pride for every belt that I hold, for every promotion that I work for. I take it very seriously. And, you know, I want to be a respected champion for any promotion. And that just means, I think, trying to have the best match on every show that you're on, and trying to give the best performance you can possibly give every time you go out there.
Yeah, totally agree. So do you know who you'll be defending your championship against next? Have they declared the next card, or when you might be defending it next?
They haven't announced my opponent yet, but their next show, soon to be announced, actually hasn't been announced on social media, but will be in the next few days. Will be March the 21st, so keep a lookout for that. And yeah, I'm sitting here waiting to find out who that will be against.
Awesome. So looking back at your wrestling career up to this point, what would you say were some of your proudest moments? You mentioned earlier how you're proud to represent Win as their champion, and you've won other heavyweight championships. But what would you say were some of the really standout, proudest moments that you've been a part of up until now? Then,
I would say the first championship I ever won, which was the LDN Academy Championship. You know, not the biggest championship in the world, but it's my first ever one. And I managed to have my dad and a few friends there to see me do that. And it was against Tom Dawkins, who even then I rated highly, and rate even more now. So that match means a lot to me, actually. And I really enjoyed that match. I still look back on that match very fondly. The first ever Clash show means a lot to me because it was in my hometown. You know, to be honest, as much as I always wanted to be a wrestler, I think even more than that, my boyhood dream was to run a wrestling promotion, and I got to do that. I got to do that in my hometown. I sold it out, and I got to wrestle someone on that show who also lived in Bournemouth, Marcus Anthony, who I have known since I was 12 years old. So I mean, what more can you ask for, really? You know, and then on top of that, winning the 4 championships that I've won for Apex Pro Wrestling, for Ultimate British Wrestling, and for Win Wrestling. You know, just the fact that someone would put, you know, has that much faith in you, would put that much faith in you, you know, to give you their top title and put you in their main event on every show, that means a lot to me. And to be honest, I think February the 16th will be another huge moment. The last Clash show in my hometown, 2 years of hard work. I really want to sell that out like we sold the first show out. And I think that's going to be one of those moments that I look at with great fondness, just like all those other ones as well.
Definitely. So since you returned in 2017, you've had many great matches against some really great opponents. But are there any wrestlers still out there that you would like to be in the ring with that you haven't had the chance to so far?
Are there any? I mean, yeah. There's a lot of wrestlers out there who I would absolutely love to work. I tell you, one person who I've wanted to work for a long time, and I'm actually getting to do that on the 20th of this month, is Chris Tyler. Right. Have you seen Chris Tyler's work?
I'm not too familiar with Chris Tyler, I've got to be honest.
He is another guy who's hugely underrated, and I don't think gets as much credit as he deserves. But I've wanted to work him for 2 years, and on the 20th of December at Hope Wrestling, I'm finally getting to do that. You know, another guy who I would absolutely love to work would be Chris Brooks, who I think is kind of, you know, after Pete Dunne, is now the next kind of person who's come along and has set the scene alight.
Yeah.
I would absolutely love to work Paul Robinson, who I just think is, you know, an unsung British legend, to be honest. You know, he's been grafting away for about 10 years in this country and regularly has some of the best matches I've ever seen.
Totally agree. Yeah.
And I tell you, someone who I would absolutely die to wrestle is Will Ospreay. I actually trained with him when he first started training at the London School of Lucha Libre, and from the day he stepped into that training school, from his first day, he was just something special. And I got to work him in a couple of tag matches very, very early on in his career. But I mean, he's gone on to be probably the best wrestler in the world now. And I got to train with him at Frontline Wrestling for a year. But I would absolutely it'd be a dream match to be able to wrestle him in a singles match, I think.
Next question then, CJ. So what motivates you as a professional wrestler? What motivates you to go out there and do what you do every single weekend?
I want to have the best match on the show every single time I go out there. That's what motivates me. I want to make the crowd the loudest that they've been all night. I want them to enjoy my match the most. I want them to hate me the most. I want them to feel more passionately about my match than any other match. And if I can make them do that or even get close to that, I come away with an incredible buzz, feeling so great. And to be honest, it's, being out there wrestling, even if it's only in front of 50 people, whether it's 250, whether it's 50, whether it's 300, or whether it's 30, if you go out there and you get a good reaction and you just feel that energy from the crowd, it's such a great feeling. And that's what drives me.
And what would you say was the biggest piece of advice that you've been given that's really helped you in your wrestling career?
Work hard. Never be afraid to go the extra mile. Don't take anything for granted. Be the guy who turns up first and leaves last. Shake everyone's hand. Be respectful. Be polite. And first and foremost, more than anything else, enjoy yourself. Relax. A lot of people, I think, can take it too seriously. They can get too stressed out. They don't enjoy the show or the matches because they're too nervous or they're too worried about something. Have fun. Enjoy it, because you're giving up often a whole day to be at a show for the sake of 10 minutes of being in the ring in front of the fans. If you come away from that entire day having not enjoyed it, then what have you gained? Why are you doing this? Enjoy it, have fun, and work hard. Someone told me when I was first starting out that hard work and respect, getting your head down and grafting will get you everywhere. And for the longest time, I didn't believe them. But the longer I've wrestled and the more I've seen, hard work does pay off more often than not in this industry. So, yeah, be that person who turns up first and helps set up the ring and helps out everyone and is nice to everyone, and doesn't go stabbing people in the back and doesn't turn up late and then leave early and is disrespectful to people. Do you know what I mean?
That's some good advice in itself there, CJ.
Yeah.
That's really good advice. So now you've got a really big weekend coming up this weekend, as a matter of fact. On Saturday night, you've got, I believe it's Saturday, you've got a four-way number one contenders match to crown the new number one contender for the RCWA British Heavyweight Championship. And that's going to be in Raynham on Saturday. And you're going up against Kelly Six, Warren Banks and Spike Trevay. So that's going to be a fantastic, hard-hitting, exciting match. And then the following night, you're in another four-way back in Boreham Wood, and this is for Clash, for the Meteora Championship, and it'll be Dexter, Cassius, Harry Mant, and yourself. And I believe this is going to be Clash's penultimate show. So a really big weekend for yourself there. Tell us about these two massive matches that you'll be a part of on Saturday and Sunday.
Well, Saturday is, for RTWA. Is going to be probably one of the biggest matches of the year for me, I think. RCWA just came back from a year's hiatus. They had their first show back in October 26th, and I worked Dexter on that one, and an RCWA champion, MOS, who's their Elite One champion. And so this is their second show back, and when they closed their doors at the end of 2018, they were still doing great numbers and still doing very, very well. A little bit like Clash in a way, but they decided to close their doors. But there was an appetite from the RCWA fans to them to come back, and they were hungry to see them come back, and they sold out their first show. 200 plus people. It looks like they're going to sell this one out again, so it's going to be a capacity crowd. There's a very very few tickets. I think there's maybe 20 tickets left, something like that. So if you want to get a ticket, anyone who's listening, go to the RCWA Facebook page, message them, get one of the last tickets, because this show will sell out. This match is going to be huge. Spike Trivet, one of the biggest names on the scene right now. Warren Banks, one of the fastest rising stars in the country, and Kelly Six, who is, another kind of unsung legend, who's been around a while and is an RCWA legend, and doesn't always get the credit he deserves. And I just want to hang with all three of them, to be honest, and have a great match in front of what will probably be yet another sold out crowd. I love RCWA, another great promotion. Sunday obviously means a lot to me, something very dear to my heart. Pro Wrestling Clash in my hometown for the second to last time, and I'm wrestling three guys who I've really pushed for over the last 2 years. I found Dexter at Wrestling League. I saw Harry Ment there. They're two guys who I rate a lot, two guys who over the last year I've really been trying to push to the top of Clash and get people's eyeballs on, because I don't think enough people see them. And Cassius is someone who I trained with at the London School of Lucha Libre all the way back in 2013 and 14. And he's finally getting, I think, the credit that he deserves. And I'm sure we'll see him on Progress very soon. And he's setting the world alight at Riptide. So to get to share a ring with three other guys who I've really been trying to champion and push over the last year at Pro Wrestling Clash is kind of a great honor and feels really good to me. And both of those matches, as I said earlier, I just want to go out there and try and have the best match on the show, and really give the fans something to scream and shout about, and enjoy the 10 or 15 minutes that we're in the ring for.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those two matches look like they're going to steal the show on their respective cards. So they look absolutely outstanding. I can't wait to catch a glimpse of those two. So final question then for you, CJ. Looking ahead to next year, 2020, what are your plans? What are your goals for next year? Do you have your eyes set on any championships or any challenges or any promotions that you haven't worked for or had a chance to work for yet that you'd like to work for? So what are your kind of goals for 2020 then, CJ?
Tell you what, this isn't going to be the most interesting answer. You're probably going to regret asking that question. But I don't do goals. I don't set myself goals. I feel like I see a lot of people towards the end of the year. It happens at the end of every year. They put out these tweets or they put out the posts on Facebook, and it's like, this year I want to work these 10 people, or this year I want to work at these 10 promotions, or this year I want to win these things. Now, you've been a lifelong wrestling fan. Am I right in saying that?
Correct.
So you're fully aware that you've been close enough to wrestling to understand that actually none of those things are within the control of the wrestler, right? Like,
very true.
Who you work isn't up to you. Where you work isn't up to you, and whether you win a title or not isn't up to you. Whether you win or lose isn't up to you. So that's in the hands of the people who run the promotions and the people who book the cards. And so I find it a little bit odd that people do set themselves goals that they don't actually have any control over. Does that make sense? And so sometimes I just feel like you're setting yourself up for disappointment, because it may happen, it may not happen, but it's completely out of your control. So what I say to myself every year is, I just want to have as many matches as I can possibly have. I want to make all of those matches the best I can possibly make them, and I want to continue to enjoy wrestling, because the moment I stop enjoying it is the moment I stop altogether. So my goal for 2020 is just to enjoy every single match I have and try and make it the best match on that show.
There we go. Well, what a great answer to wrap up the interview then, CJ. So thank you very much for being a part of Wrestling with Jonas and being a part of this podcast. Before we let you go, CJ, do you have any plugs, any social media handles where my listeners can get hold of you, say hi, get in touch, find out about where you're going to be wrestling throughout December and 2020? So throw out your plugs if you have anybody.
Yep, great. So first and foremost, can I just say, this Sunday, Pro Wrestling Clash, we haven't quite sold out yet. There's 26 tickets left. We'd love to sell those 26 tickets and make it a sellout. You can go to 96 Shenley Road to get your tickets for that. The full address is tickets.96shenleyroad.co.uk. On top of that, if you want to give me a follow on Facebook, that's CJ Carter Wrestler, or give me a follow on Instagram and that is CJ Carter 2017. Or if you would like to give me a follow on Twitter, which I'm not quite as active on as Instagram or Facebook, but I'm still active on there. That's CJ Carter _87.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to interview you this fine evening. And like I say, best of luck with your matches that you have penciled in for Saturday and Sunday. And best of luck with the rest of your career. But thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
No, you're very welcome. So that does draw an end to our episode, our special interview with CJ Carter. We look forward to doing more interviews in conjunction with Turnbuckle TV in the future, so stay tuned for those. Our next show will be dropping on Saturday, where we do our weekly recap of NXT and AEW Dynamite and all the hot news that's going down in the world of wrestling from the last 7 days. So please keep it tuned to the Wrestling with Jonas podcast for all of your weekly NXT and AEW updates, regular WWE and AEW pay-per-view reviews, special interviews like this one, and so much more. And if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please don't forget to spread the word, tell your friends and tell your family, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you are notified every time a new episode of the Wrestling with Jonas podcast drops. In the meantime, from myself and from CJ, thank you very much for listening. Catch you all up again very, very soon.